Greetings, Ken Woodward here. Welcome back to another episode of Curated Questions. Together, we engage inquisitive humans about how they use questions to navigate and make sense of our world. I am a fellow traveler and pilgrim on this journey, and I'm glad you're here. 9 months ago, I was in conversation with Naomi Campbell of the Right Question Institute. We were recording an episode, and somewhere in that conversation, she said a word that deeply resonated: agency. She was talking about questions, about how the act of asking is a way that people who have been pushed to the margins claim a voice, how asking is a form of self-advocacy, how it is, in her words, agency. I've been chasing that word ever since, aware each time I use it, and then let the residue sit. I told you at the end of that episode that there would be more to follow. I did not give you a date, but I gave you my word that I would come back with an answer. This is me keeping that word. Here is what I didn't have the language for 9 months ago. When Naomi said agency, I felt the naming in my body before I understood it in my head. It was not a new idea arriving. It was an old thing I'd been carrying as I investigated questions, finally getting its name. I knew it to be true the way we know our own pulse. And then I spent 9 months trying to understand what it was that I had recognized. This episode is what I found. Agency is the authorship of our own lives, not the authority to control everything that happens to us. None of us have that luxury. Authorship is something smaller and more stubborn than control. It's the refusal to be only what the world wrote about us. It is the act of picking up the pen. And here's the part that took me 9 months to see. The smallest act of authorship is a question. Think about what happens the moment we ask something. Up until that instant, we are receiving the world, taking it as it's handed to us. The names, the rules, the way things are. The moment we ask, we stop receiving and start writing. A question is the first mark we make on a story someone else started. That is what Naomi gave me. She did not say it in this way. She was talking about her clients, people navigating courts and systems built to keep them quiet. But what she named was universal. To ask is to author. To author is to be an agent. An agency, I have come to believe, is not granted by anyone and not earned by anyone. It's inherent. It comes with being human. We do not get it from a job, a degree, or a country. We arrive with it, which means it can be suppressed, but it cannot be removed. And that distinction is the whole episode. Here is the trouble. Most of the stories we are handed do not feel like stories. They feel like facts. The rule nobody can explain. The one a parent passes down with nothing but, that is just the way it is, does not feel like a rule. It feels like the weather. We do not author against the weather. We just live in it. So the first and hardest act of authorship is noticing that the weather was written by somebody, and that we are allowed to ask who and why and whether it has to stay that way. Now, I have to be clear about where I stand when I say all this. I have the room to sit and think about agency. I have a quiet house and a safe neighborhood for a long walk and the time to mull over a single word for 9 months. A great many people do not. They are not contemplating authorship. They are grasping for it in rooms designed to deny it to them. I'm insulated from the people who feel this absence most sharply. I know that. So this is not an episode for the comfortable. The comfortable are a byline. This is for the people the world tried to write over. It did not get the last word. I met 2 of them on a sidewalk. Now, before I tell you about them, one thing of note. I've changed their names, both of them, including the names they had chosen for themselves on the street, which matters, because choosing your own name is its own act of authorship. I changed them because these are not my stories. I'm only carrying them. They belong to the people who lived them. And the way I honor that is to ask what protects them rather than assume I have the right to use them as they are. I will probably be doing this from now on, every time I bring you someone I meet. Not as a rule I check off once, but as a question I keep asking. Whose story is this, and what would honor it is theirs? That question is the whole point of this episode, so I figured I should start by living it. I will call him Doc. I met him at a bus stop. The first thing he did was tell me my sign was bullshit. He said it louder than that, and I was walking through his neighborhood with a big yellow sign, and he was not having it. I crossed the street and asked if he was willing to chat. We talked for an hour. He waved off bus after bus, telling them to keep going as he would catch the next one. And somewhere in that hour, I stopped being a guy with a sign and became a guy he was teaching. Here's what I learned about Doc. His mother was 5'4". He stood about 6'4", and she refused to let her son just absorb what the world handed him. When he read a book as a boy, she did not let him close it and walk away. She quizzed him on it afterward to make sure he was thinking and not just consuming. She would not let him follow the crowd. She built something into him early, before he had a word for it. She built an author. To this day, he gives her credit for the way his mind works. Think about how rare that is. Most of us are taught the opposite. We're taught to take the answer, trust the source, and move along. Doc was raised to interrogate the thing in his hands before he accepted it. That's not a personality trait. That is a discipline somebody installed in him, one question at a time. He grew up to be a man who does his own research and does it well, who does not trust what he is told by the media or anyone else until he has gone and checked it for himself. He earned a degree in chemistry. He reads law, history, psychology on his own for no reason other than he wants to know. By the end of an hour, he had handed me a list of things to go look up, like he was assigning me homework. He was. As we talked, he walked me back through American history, and he stopped at the Dred Scott decision. He wanted me to understand it, a document with a full force of law behind it that declared an entire people had no rights the rest of the country was bound to respect. Not a wound, a ruling. The machinery of a nation used to declare that a whole people could not be authors at all. He named that, from memory, at a bus stop, because he had gone and learned the history that was written to erase him. The country handed him a story about who he was allowed to be, and he read the fine print, then spent his life arguing with it. Doc's first job was as a police officer. His first call was a home where a mother had phoned because her son was threatening to kill her. He came through the door. The mother was across the room. The son came at him from the other side, and Doc raised his weapon to the young man's forehead, and the mother screamed. He did not pull the trigger. I'll leave it there, because the details belong to him, not to you, not to me. What I want us to hold is the half second. In that half second, the whole script said one thing, and he wrote another. Nobody would have written that ending for him. A young black officer, a first call, a threat in the room, every pressure pointing in one direction. He chose the other one, and he has been choosing it ever since. Because he kept authoring. Military, teaching school, finance, and now he spends his days as a community investigator looking into police wrongdoing. Hold the shape of that life for a second. The man whose first call put a gun in his hand now spends his days holding that same power to account. He took the thing that nearly wrote him and he turned it into the work of his life. He did not run from the institution. He walked back into it and started asking it questions on behalf of the people it targets. That is agency. That is authorship. And every step of it ran on questions. The questions his mother drilled into him, the questions he asked of the history he was handed, the questions he now asks of the institutions that failed the people he came up with. Doc is not a lesson. He is a chemistry graduate with a 5'4" mother and a handle he chose for himself, who does not trust a thing until he has checked it. He is a whole and particular man. I just got to stand next to him for an hour. Most of what I'm telling you is about asking, but I need to tell you about a woman who asked me. It was the end of a long day. She came at me with questions, and they were not gentle. She asked why it was fine for me to walk through her neighborhood when she could not safely walk through mine. She asked what real difference I thought I was making. She asked if I had an idea how tired she was of dealing with all of this. I do not have her name. She did not offer one. She asked. She did not wait for me to recover, and she kept moving. And that's exactly right. She owed me nothing. Not an answer, not a name, not a softer tone. But look at what she did. She is the person in the story with the least power handed to her, and she used a question to take authorship of that whole encounter, to put me on my heels, to make me account for myself. That is Naomi's point lived out on a sidewalk. The question flowing the other direction, from the person the world tried to silence, straight at the man with the sign. She is the proof that agency is inherent. Nobody gave it to her. She picked up the pen and wrote on me. I'm not the only one thinking about this. I want us to feel the edges of something. Naomi runs the legal program at the Right Question Institute. Their whole method is teaching people who have been shut out how to ask their own questions. Last week, I released a conversation with Larry Robertson, whose new book, Great Question, quotes the founders of that same institute, landing on the idea that asking is really knowing that you can choose. It's the same well Naomi drinks from. A philosopher named Pia Lauritsen is writing about why we ask at all. There is a whole circle of people, mostly working alone, circling the same truth. And last month, one of the most prominent voices of the world joined them. The Pope released his encyclical, 42,000 words on how to remain a human being in the age of artificial intelligence, on safeguarding the dignity of the human person against being optimized away. He defended the specialness of the human person. The part he did not name is the one I keep coming back to. The way we exercise that specialness is by asking. A machine can hand us every answer ever recorded. It cannot want to know. The question is the part that is ours. And the easier the answers get, the less we tend to ask. That is the quiet danger. Not that a machine will take the asking from us by force, but that we will set it down ourselves, because something else is willing to do it for us. We have always found ways to hand off the asking, to experts, to traditions, to the loudest voice in the room, to whatever tells us that this is just the way it is. The machine is only the newest and the most convenient. The work of staying human is the same work it has always been. We keep the pen. To know we hold the pen is to hold the one thing nothing can take. I'll call her Pearl. Her son was murdered. Here's what she did with it. She is a retired nurse. She moved onto the block about a year and a half before I walked down her sidewalk full of kids. She could have spent that retirement any way she wanted. Her choice was clear. She made herself available to every child on the block, and she had them all call her grandma. She became, on purpose, the safe and loving presence she believes might have changed the lives of the young men who killed her son. She said it plainly to me. She is sure the two who did it did not grow up in a place that was secure or held or full of love. So she's building exactly that place with her own hands and her own days. The kind of neighborhood where a boy grows up is held instead of hunted. There was a block party coming and she invited me to it. A stranger with a sign she had known for 15 minutes, because that is what the woman does. She gathers people in. She told me that she's doing it such that her son's death will not have been in vain. Sit with that a second. The most precious thing a person can lose was snatched from her. The authorship of a life she gave was ended by someone else's hand. She had every right to stop writing. Most of us would have. And her answer was to author a whole neighborhood. To look at the people who did the worst thing imaginable to her and decide what they needed was the very thing she could now spend her life building for the children coming up behind them. To take the worst sentence anyone could hand her and refuse to let it be the last one. I wrote 6 words in my notes that day. I want to be like Pearl. The murder is the soil. The neighborhood is what grew. I started this by telling you about a promise and about a word that landed in my body before I understood it. Here's the answer I came back with 9 months later. Agency is not a feeling, and it's not a privilege. It is authorship, and it is ours because we are human, and no document, no system, and no machine can remove it, though plenty have tried, and plenty are trying now. The smallest way we exercise it is the oldest thing we know how to do. We ask. Doc asked his way out of the script handed to a young black man. Pearl asked what could be built from the worst day of her life. A woman whose name I never learned asked me to account for myself, and she was right to. None of them waited for permission. They picked up the pen. So here is what I want us to take away from this time together. Not my signature question, a different one, built for today. Now we must find the room in our lives where we have quietly accepted a story we did not write, the rule nobody can explain, the role we were handed, the verdict somebody else reached about who we get to be. And in that room, ask the one question we have been told in 100 silent ways that we are not allowed to ask. The question is us picking up the pen. It is ours. It always was.